Thank you all very much, and thank you for a beautiful lunch. So we have let's just set the parameters. You know, everyone's talking about time and all these type of things, and just want to make sure that everybody understands the interpreters need to close up shop no later than 2:45 for this session. So what that means is that we're going to try to bring this plane down at between 2:30 and 2:35. So that gives us great amount of time to get to know each other in a different way and to extract some more lessons from our colleagues, and we certainly learned a lot from them. So thank you very much again, and to particularly our colleagues from the Republic of Congo that have come here. Okay, so you know, my job at the end is going to be try to pull together things, but so let's get right into the question and answers. I have oodles of questions. I don't have many answers, so I'd like to open it up just at the outset here. Could you, Will, right at the outset, you talked about the importance of an MOU.
Yeah.
And the importance of an MOU. Could you just get into a little bit more detail? To the extent that you're able to talk about it, what's in that MOU at a very high level? And is that MOU, is that an MOU that's binding legally, spiritually?
Okay, so
could you tell us what you feel comfortable with?
Right,
because it was your point number one.
That was point number one, but I was referring to a very specific conversation about this idea that was actually brought up by an American construction company, and the point was made, and I've had some direct experience with this. Back last June, there was a senior health official from another African country talking at the World Bank, and I was proposing a procurement model that would allow for unsolicited proposal to be reviewed by the government. And he shot it down. He said, I don't care how transparent it is. If they see me talking to you, I'm going to get attacked. And that's the problem. And so the notion of a government-to-government MOU would be something that would be drafted with language that comes up, almost approaches the level of treaty language, but not that far, because only the Congress can approve or the Senate can approve treaties. Mm-hmm. So try to, working with a bilateral, in our case, it could be the U.S. government or the Dutch government. In your case, it could be the U.S. government or the Irish government, I suppose. But we would be to provide a framework with as much detail as possible to encourage the inflow of private or mobilized private money in the global health space. And then have some specific targets. I mean, this is all negotiable. And probably you can't do it overnight. You'd have to think hard about it. But the point of that mechanism is to allow the different health officials in the country to pursue those conversations with the private sector and saying this is all being done under the auspices of this MOU.
Yeah, great. And if our colleagues from the Republic of Congo have any particular reactions to Will's comments, that would be helpful as well. The local, sort of the local view, global view here, local view here. Yeah.
Yes.
La traduction, ça fonctionne?
No.
Okay.
Otherwise.
Okay.
Trevor, otherwise I can
right.
get like the picture, and then they can add some things. But I think it's a very important question, because in fact 1 year ago we started with basic MOUs, where Philips signed an MOU with UNFPA, a global one, where there was one article saying that from the moment that we are going into a country, we need a supplementary agreement, because that MOU is not legally binded, so you need to have a supplementary agreement. Then we had an agreement, an engagement letter, a protocole d'accord in French. It's also MOU with the Ministry of Health, where the Ministry of Health said that they were okay with the phase 1, with the phase 2, over 7 years, with quite some details. But since we didn't do like a solution design, we couldn't put any detail in it. And then you see that after 18 months, our legal department, also the legal department of UNFPA, but also legal department of the government said, okay, you need to have binded agreements and binded contracts. So under the global MOU with UNFPA, you have that article, supplementary agreement. So we wrote a specific UNFPA Philips contract for Congo with roles and responsibilities, and then some additions, because it's
a terms of reference rather than a specific. I think we need to give the right names to things. Yeah.
And then Philips say, okay, we want to go into a solution company, but a lot of departments are not right at that point. So we see that we came with a supplementary agreement towards the contract that we have with Ministry of Health, and it became like a pure commercial contract, where and Thierry and Patrick can talk about it, where you see that, and there we had to learn, where Philips, the back officers, made a pure commercial contract based on the negotiation that Patrick and Lemine and myself were doing with Ministry of Health. So they created that commercial contract. We went back to Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Planning, and they said, this is not what we discussed. We don't understand that language. And as such, we had to readapt. And we thought that we were making a better document. And then it went back to our legal department. And they said, we don't understand. So it took us like 2 months to come with a decent binded contract. And it was a learning, and it took us like 5 months to really have the contracts. And now you see that we are just waiting for the last signature of the Ministry of Finance, and that just because we create a new business model, there is money involved, and they need just to approve. So we have approval from all the stakeholders, but you see that there is like a final binded signature. And this is also requested by FMO, which is the Dutch Development Bank, giving us the money, because they want to have like the government involved, and that signature will prove it. But you see it also from Philips, because Philips learned out of other PPPs and large-scale programs worldwide, and suddenly somewhere in the organization said, we need to have that signature. And you see that it's a process, and we learned a lot out of it.
Please, Maria Rosa. Yes, of course.
And all this. So, as I said, I think it's very important to give the right names to the right things, in the sense that, again, I want to go back to the point I made, and I made it very clear. We need to have clarity on roles. We are a team here. We are a partnership, very passionate for this, but we're very clear, for example, that the UN has those little rules, which are not little, but anyway, are rules for engaging in partnerships. We don't create any preferential treatment for anybody. So this has to be very clear in whatever type of memorandum of understanding, agreement, whatever. So this has to be very clear. And a partnership like this, which is a partnership on scaling up innovation, doesn't have to be perceived by any means like somehow, let's say, circling around, let's call it like that, circling around the procurement processes that we have as UN agency. So this has to be crystal clear in this conversation. So, and it is a very important point. The memorandum of understanding we have with Philips as a global memorandum of understanding. So I say, I'm a lawyer. a memorandum of understanding is something, if you like, where you say, I like you and I want to do some things with you, okay? So in the memorandum of understanding, you don't get in too much detail in what exactly you want to do.
Be complete.
But what I say,
please consult
like
your
leading
directory
the
and
Office
call
of
again,
Partnerships, I
or
don't want
ask
to
your
have
operator for
100
assistance.
memoranda of understanding
This is a
on my
recording.
table that don't lead to anything. I could showcase you that I have, I don't know, 1,000 partnerships with memorandum of understanding, but if they don't take me anywhere, it doesn't serve the purpose. So this memorandum of understanding that we have with Philips is general. We want to reach 55 million women, I think, by 2025. So that's let's say the overarching. But we want to do that also building platforms that allow other stakeholders to come on board. So that's a very important point. And those two sets of rules that I said are really key for the UN to enter into meaningful and effective partnerships and clearing the ground from any type of misunderstanding.
Okay, yes, please. Sorry, John, I'll get you in a second here. I think we...
Barbara Bulls, I introduced
I'm
myself.
going to reverse
I think,
things. I
yeah.
respect with the table, but I want to go to the public too, to make sure that that's... please, ma'am. And please, comments, 20 seconds maximum, go to the question. Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent panel again. Very little has been discussed about leadership. Maybe you can share, when you defined the objectives, how would you say, who was your champion leader and how did you keep the objectives and vision at the top level to really make it, not get into details and bureaucracy, but really achieve the results and keep pushing further?
Great question. Great
Yeah.
question. Thank you.
Should we start? Should we start? Or somebody in the Congo? But just to say, Thierry, it's a very fine line between the leadership at a very high level. Sorry, were you at the very...
If you want. I think there's two ways to interpret the question. One is the leadership of the partnership, and the other is the leadership of the program in the Congo, and how do we take care of what about the care and feeding of the Congo? I think there's two things going on here.
So I'll just touch the beginning, and then Thierry can go ahead. I think the truth is in the middle here, because you need to have the highest endorsement about the organization, and in our case, the endorsement is from the highest leadership, so our executive director, but you need to have the leadership also at the country level. That's very important. So the two of them need to come together. So for us, what I can say is that you have the highest level of endorsement at both levels, and that for me creates really the enabling environment for a partnership.
And that's also true for Philips. The MOU was signed by our Chief Executive Officer for International Markets.
Sorry, Thierry.
That particular person, does he report to the global CEO?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
So you have
One
to
management level above the global CEO. That's very important. Yeah, please.
Okay, sorry, can I add something? Can I add something? It's also, I think, the global CEO protecting this program. Because what I didn't say is when we finished the clinical studies around emergency obstetric and newborn care, we had the chance that the global CEO, who had to speak at the World Economic Forum in Cape Town, visited an EMOC program in the Western Cape, where he could see and feel what was going on. And it was in fact also his idea to create that incubator. And he's following tightly all what we are doing over years. And when you see that he speaks for international organizations and in plenty of congresses, and you see each time that he was referring to what we are doing, not only the programs, but also the partnerships.
Okay. Thank you. John, you were pointing to somebody over here. I'm sorry, who had their...
No, Thierry.
Trevor, Thierry's got something to add.
Thierry, please.
Ok, merci.
En parlant de ces objectifs et de leadership par rapport au protocole d'accord,
the agreements and the protocol of MOU at the level of the Republic of Congo. Just to know that the MOU that Philips has signed with the Republic of Congo was based with the priorities, with the objectives of the Ministry of Health. Donc, we didn't come to, Philip didn't come in to invent things. So, if I could speak, level of leadership. Donc, there was already 10 acts and priority. The program that Philips has proposed on the MOU in May 2018, it was based on axis number 6 and 10 axis and priority. The leadership of the Ministry of Health, as long as the FPA has been said, and what I've been spoken about at the end of my earlier conversation, we have been reacting on the same acts and the objectives of the Minister of Health, of the entrance of the new government, with the objectives in the 5-month. And at that point, Philips had gotten the objective of number 6. So here's where the MOU had came and made comfortable these acts. So the contract has come upon us to sign. Donc we still on the basis of this MOU. Donc they're also the base of the indication of these objectives of the Ministry of Health. Now, if Patrick has anything else to add.
Great presentations earlier. I think what I heard was a lot of the global challenges that then translate into being facilitated through trusted partners, both at a global UN or even local level, like Theory and the organization. My question is around whether there was taking it maybe on a local level, as a private sector partner locally, were these challenges also very similar or different for you to establish with the various players, either with the UN and government, et cetera, and just to understand that translation?
Oui, le challenge pour pouvoir
to have the confidence to advance them and moving forward to the other partners and the local partnership were very, very, very difficult. It was not easy. I must say, and I want to be precise, just to have the implication, the Minister of Health was very difficult. So, as Terry has said, at the base, we did a feasibility study. We had technicians of the ministry. We did the study of feasibility, and we went on the axis of the building up the needs of the Ministry of State. So it was easier to discuss and bring these projects forward. But it was very difficult. That was a little bit more optimistic for the project was the people for the population. So since they're already working with the government, all these projects, and since we come to locally, so the possibilities of the project has brought forward. They've all understood that we could go together, and they were coming together on this.
Je voudrais ajouter quelque chose pour conforter ce que mon collègue.
My colleague could say. And I also want to point out something as well. It's true that we have a tendency to talk about the Ministry of Health, but there's at least a minimum of 3 ministries that are involved, and each one of them are independent, naturally. There's the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Planning. So that's where we are doing our entering into a program, into a program of the Health for the Republic. And third, there is the Ministry of Finance. That's basically the nerve of the war. So it's very complicated. You can have the authorizations of the Ministry of the accord by the Ministry of Health, but the other agreements on the other side are very hard to get. But even though we might think we could think it go fast, but it could take 2 or 3 months. So when we talk about signatures that were very difficult to have, the majority of time waiting, so that usually comes from the Ministry of Finance. So the structure currently of Congo, the configuration, like there's a financial crisis that we've had the last few years. So it makes that the Ministry of Finance cannot take any kind of crisis. We can't take any pressure because it's still considered to be very sensitive when we talk about the situation of finances for the country. Donc, it is very complicated to, at that level, to reach these kind of agreements. Donc, locally, you must know, Philips and us, we have not stopped before we get to, we had to meet with a lot of people locally. The local commission, the European Commission, with the local bank. Then we also had to find out about the counterbalances that state. It's a global situation today. As we've rested with the most secure partners. Donc, about what base this says Ministry of Health. Donc, with Philips. So several have been contacted, but it has not been at all easy these past 3 years.
Something. So maybe I was not clear earlier, but we didn't came with empty hands. So we developed already a model with UNFPA in Benin, and in fact with that experience we came to Congo. And I think it's thanks to the UNFPA representative in Congo and CIC that we were able to explain to people what we wanted to do. And that national co-creation session in May 2018 was very important. And it's like Thierry said, there all the stakeholders were present. And we did a co-moderating session where Ministry of Health, Philips and UNFPA were presenting the model. And it was very difficult because in the beginning we had like 25 stakeholders. And when you see where we are now, we are maybe with 6 stakeholders. But you already see that since that we are signing contracts and we are starting implementation, more and more people are coming back. Thank you.
Jeffrey, you okay with all of that? All right. John?
I think that I understand the distinction between the global MOU and the local terms of reference for roles and responsibilities, and the distinction between that and the procurement process where you're actually engaging through the contract system. But the question I guess I have is and congratulations for getting all the signatures. It's really fabulous. But But once you get started, I guess my question is, do you feel like all the signatory partners are going to get the data they need to know that the partnership is working? I mean, it seems to me that getting started is incredibly hard, but then sustaining means that everybody's got to come back and say, this works for me. The government agencies, the Philips, people have to see some evidence that what they signed up for is what's being delivered. And I guess just reflections on that. Do you feel like early reports are working well, and then if you're even foreseeing some potential for adjustment, how do you imagine the partnership coming together and figuring out how to adjust what you need going forward? That may be too early to ask this. Maybe premature, but it seems like it's a real issue for all partnerships.
Si j'ai bien compris la question,
Understood the question. I would like to say that on a level of administrative and jurisdiction, we are very, very well advanced. So on parallel, we have not stopped on the administrative side, and as we continue, so we already have. We already have the legal part, the terms. Then we have the Ministry of Centers, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning, Philips. That's already on the table, with the familiar table for the first minister for signature. We also have on the other side the team. Have evaluated the structure, how to put everything together. The energy, everything is already set. We have on every side the responsible for the program. That was outside Brazzaville, who was working with the technicians of the Ministry of Sciences, the medical part, the medicine part, typically the operational part and logistics. We've effectuated the missions. We have the returns of all this and everything we're going to deal with. We also say that. So, like I said earlier about the jurisdictional administration, we have a validation of the confirmation of the Congo law. There's a reimbursement. So they gotta validate that we are confirmed with the laws. So we are sure that in the place of operational, that we are sure of everything that we're going to do. So Luc is also going to mention that our project is going to start. The first containers arrive in Fontenoy, Brazzaville. It's about 558 miles from Brazzaville. The logistic is also from Brazzaville. So it's about 1,000 miles from one side to the other. There's an operational part that's continuing work while we're waiting for the signatures, administrative and the jurisdictional. But we're also advancing on the operational part. We have also met with all the people interested, the members, the committee of health, the village people, the women, the people sanitary, every level we have already met with. We already know what's going on. So we know that if we start today, we know how to implement at that moment when what we're going to have to recuperate. So there's also have to talk with Luke because there's also part that needs to be, we're talking about the solar panels, the energy, and the transmission of all this information.
Thank you, Patrick. So about the involvement of the stakeholders, and that's what I also mentioned before, it's that we created a new governance model. And in fact, we want to implement a sustainable program. So local people need to take responsibility When I speak about local people, it's the national and governmental authorities, regional authorities, and local authorities. So during our co-create session, we talked to all of those people, and there's norms and there's reality. And when you hear a minister talk and a regional health authority talk, it's completely different. And such, together with UNFPA, we said, okay, we need to build something strong, because again, afterwards, they need to take responsibility and they have to drive the program. It took us quite some time to push them in that direction. And we came with a governance model where we have a steering committee on the national level, where we come with a technical committee, which is a bit lower, but we're with all technical partners. And in fact, where I was talking 2 minutes ago about the 6 stakeholders, the 6 stakeholders are in that steering committee, in that technical committee. And then we have what we call a program management unit, where you have only 3 stakeholders, and in fact the 3 partners. And now there, it was again, was it a conflict? No, where you see that UNFPA is more following WHO guidelines. We are more following the guidelines from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where you have a different way of working. But in the meantime, because we are already starting the preparation, you see that we come together and we find a way to work together. And we found out, in fact, 1 month ago, when UNFPA took the initiative to do the mapping of the EMOC infrastructure in Congo, we found out that the governance model that we defined 8 months ago was not sufficient. So we add another layer. And really to get a finger on the pulse, to if there is a problem, that we can react. Now, of course, the Minister of Health, who is leading the steering committee, her question was, how can I get my data? And in fact, that's why the technology part and the innovation part is coming in, where you see that Ruben was telling about the 300 applications in Kenya. In Congo, you have the same. Yeah? There, we made like a choice about the data that we want to collect in phase 1, how we want to collect it, and who got access to it, and when. And we told the minister that she won't be involved like each day. That's the job of the program management unit. And afterwards, they will report to the technical committee. If the technical committee thinks that the information is valuable to tell the Minister of Health, Minister of Planning, Minister of Finance, they will do. And as such, we structured it.
We've got about time for maybe 2 more questions. So, Maria Rosa, can I just ask you a question about UNFPA's role? All these men have been speaking, so it's time for you to insert yourself into a discussion about women's health here. And you've done so but could you tell us a little bit more exactly about what you consider the role that UNFPA played here? I've heard it from our colleagues in Congo that there's a confidence building, that established trust in this type of thing. But concretely, if you're a businesswoman also, could you express that?
So I'll go a little bit back to 2 of the points that I made. One is, so the question, one of the questions came about the leadership, no? So this is a partnership that has been endorsed by the highest level of leadership. Our executive director, Natalia Kanem, has signed this partnership. So this means that this partnership has to work for us. There's no way, it's true it's a pilot, but it has to work in the best way and also protecting the reputation of our organization. So this is, I put this as the introduction of what I want to say. And I am sure that, going back to your question, our main role, the most precious role here is the role of our country office there. So to start answering your question, really the core is what our country office is able to deliver together with Philips on this partnership. And I wanted to add something to what Luke was saying. Yes, he gave all the different layers of, let's say, co-creation, all fantastic. This is all what is happening, programmatically, co-creation. But there's a very important thing that I wanted to add. You need to manage this partnership under the purely management aspect very, very well. There are key performance indicators. We want to reach out. Our interest as UNFPA and our role is that we want to reach out to X and X number of mothers in an area which is an area that is considered fragile. So that is the role. When I said at the beginning, making the invisible visible, those invisible mothers, if you ask me about my role, the role of my organization is making those mothers visible. So this is the first piece. And I think this is something where we have a leadership. Our win, and I go back to another point I was making, we need to be very honest in terms of what are the mutual wins in this partnership. A partnership, a true and genuine partnership, is a partnership where everybody has something back. So our win is that we really reach out to those mothers. And our programs, our activities in the Congo are driven towards that. A little piece of information that might help in this is that our technical division, which is the division that actually works on a daily basis on what is needed technically to make sure that that number of 800 women dying every day one day becomes zero. They are the ones who really have the knowledge. They are the ones who really have the tools. Have been heavily involved in this. This was a knowledge that, with all due respect, but because we have different roles, Philips need to be complemented with. So that was also another piece of our role. And then if you ask me about the role that we play, which is complementary with the country, is that we need to make sure that this partnership is visible. We need to make sure that this partnership has the highest level of accountability and credibility. And we need to make sure that this model works because we want to replicate it. And we also need to make sure, and I keep on saying that this concept is really proven. And that, of course, requires an investment, and which has been done, in terms of innovation by our partner. So that is also part of our role. And I think that also we can, within the United Nations environment, we can actually give visibility to a partnership with the private sector, that it's not immediately a partnership where it's about money, about funding the UN. This is something more, this is more visionary, let's say. This is a more long-term vision, a more long-term impact that we want to create.
Very, very good. Thank you very much. It's absolutely clear in my mind after hearing. What other questions? Okay. Lunch is settling in people's beings, so I think we're going to bring this to an end. So let's talk about some of the shared themes, and before we thank our panelists, and we'll bring this to an end just a slight bit earlier than we thought. And I'm going to I put big stars, and this is how I make notes, and these are the things that tend to be either very important or be repeated multiple times from different perspectives. So we heard from Will on the value of the MOUs, and I thought that was an incredibly important point. We heard from Will on but I'd love to hear more at some later stage on the role that you talked about financing in general, but other people have made reference to FMO here on the panel. And I think we have a lot to learn from FMO. I think U.S. government agencies would do well to learn from FMO. Not to say they're doing things in the wrong way, but I think we can all learn from each other. So financing. One thing that we have not spent that much time on, Luke, is a point that you made around 80% services and 20% technology, and that you're not in technology sales. I got that memo. Very, very interesting. And for people really to understand that fundamentally and what that actually takes to make that transition is not, I mean, IBM has made that transition, they would argue. A lot of other companies have started to make that transition, but that was, I think, a really, really important point. And if you're looking at shared aspirations when it comes to these type of things, to understand it's not a box company. You come back to that word box. And that you're actually negotiating with somebody who's actually trying to help you get to a solution via all legal and ethical means is, I think, important. So, Luke, I'm going to stick on you for a second here. You're an easy target. So if I did a word count on Luke, the number one word that you used was trust. And you came back to that again and again and again and again in so many different ways. And I think that was really, really important. Everybody's outlined, and even our colleagues from Congo have used expressions like the impression of the private sector, and this is my bad French, the impression of the private sector from the government's perspective is that they're living on the backs of government funds, basically. It's not a very complimentary scenario in my mind, but I think that's exactly the point. And that's probably the perception at the vast majority of ministries of health on a global basis, and almost everybody in that Ministry of Health, and it's not specific to Congo. So I couldn't agree with you more. It's trust, transparency, certainly fantastic. Luke, I'm sorry, I'm going to pile on to you. And you even talked about it, about the co-creation sessions, and you talked about all the different levels of co-creation sessions. And the issue is that business, of course, wants to just. They want you're in an airplane, they just want to dump you out and you're on the playing field and start making money, start clicking results. And that's not so easy. I mean, you're going to make a lot more mistakes than doing it the way that Philip seems to have done it here. I just love your attention to the preparation stages and literally all regions, seems like from a geographically spread perspective, but all levels of government, from the global to the local, and all stakeholders there. Now, my dear colleagues on my left have talked a lot about the triumvirate of ministries. Everyone loves to talk about health ministries because that's just the comfort zone. That's our home ministry, right? But you absolutely, absolutely said, and so did our Kenyan friends, by the way, say this, the Ministry of Finance. In listening to your presentation, it's a deal facilitator, it's a gating ministry, it's a deal stopper, potentially, right? They seem to hold the reins. The Ministry of Health is often seen, with due respect, as a debit. And at the end of the day, the finance ministry has to balance the books here, right? And you see the results when countries don't do that. But I certainly think that more in-depth discussion here at the National Academy of Medicine around the role of finance, let alone just housing these PPP units and recruiting them, like our dear colleagues have said from Kenya, recruiting them well, training them well. It couldn't be a point better made. But you also talked about the Ministry of Planning, which of the three, some people actually, 90% of the time spend time talking about the finance ministry. And about 10% of people will say, I apologize, 9% health ministry and about 10% finance ministry. But I've never heard anybody talk about the Ministry of Planning. And this is a very, very important point. And thank you for that, Terry. Thank you very much. So, final 2 points. You talked about energy and your experiences in energy. You're a construction company, large construction firm. And we also deliberated a lot, Kathy, Lisa, Clarion, and others around what's the applicability of PPP experiences in other sectors of the economy to the healthcare sector. My personal view is that there's a lot of experience from other sectors. We just don't have the creativity to look at those common points, because the issue is that the laws are being written or literally are applying to virtually all PPPs, and oftentimes those same laws they're not adjusted for the health context, because they're, as our friends from Kenya were showing, there aren't a lot of PPPs. So I really think that we have to learn a lot more. We have to break down some of those normal barriers and see what we can learn. Let's do things that truly are unique. But certainly let's take the common points from the good things that are happening in PPP best practice, law, rule, regulation from other sectors and bring them into the healthcare sector. I think this is, colleagues, you would never probably think a construction company in Congo was a Philips distributor. That's fascinating. I've seen creativity, but this brings it to a whole different level. And it all makes complete sense to me after you explain it. So those are some of the thoughts that we heard, and I welcome any other closing remarks. We're going to take a quick break. It's kind of in the middle to do a stage transition. Our colleague Brenda Colatrella from Merck is going to join us, and then Renuka Gade from BD is going to present, and then Mary Piatek from USAID in a little bit here. So any other closing words from our colleagues from NAM? Sounds like we solved all the world's problems. World peace is breaking out all over. Thank you very much.